Welcome back to Prepared to Prevail, where our goal is to bring you helpful and actionable information from industry professionals that help you on your journey to daily preparedness and an upgraded level of capability. Today we're going to be talking about an incident from January 18, 2026 in Minnesota. This occurred in a church where a group of protesters arrived and disrupted the church service. We'll go ahead and play some video from ABC News here in a second. I want to preface this with, I'm not an attorney. I'm not here to give legal advice. And there is a lot of Monday morning quarterbacking that could happen. We don't have all the angles. We don't have all the story. We may learn some more details later on. It's very, very early. This just happened about a day ago at the time that this is being recorded. So let's go ahead and roll the video now, and we'll talk about some takeaways after the video rolls through.
Hi, Jack. The Department of Justice is investigating a disruption at a Minnesota church over the weekend. What's the DOJ saying about that?
That's right. Yesterday, during morning services at a St. Paul church, there was a disruption. A group of demonstrators came in and were protesting and chanting anti-ICE slogans in the middle of this worship service. Senior justice officials, including the Attorney General and the head of the Civil Rights Division, have said this is a version of intimidating Christians, and that they were interfering with their First Amendment rights and rights that are protected under what's called the FACE Act, which is an act that was designed to protect access to clinics, but also protects people in worship, in houses of worship in particular. And so they're investigating whether there are violations of the FACE Act and pledged to prosecute those demonstrators who they say are not protected under the First Amendment in that house of worship.
So as you can see from the video there, this is a very tense situation, has very high potential to go volatile, and it absolutely could be a lot worse. At this time, I'm not aware of any injuries or use of force. That could change as details come out and more information is made available. But at this time, it doesn't sound like there was use of force or injuries or anything like that. Sounds like it was just a significant disturbance. What we can see in the video there is it looks like you have members from both sides engaging in some argument. It's very tense. Again, very high potential for this to go very bad. And so the burning question on a lot of people's minds right now is, what can we do? If we're a church safety team member, church security team member, what can we do if this comes to our church? If a similar incident happens in the future at our church, what can we do? Well, I want to start with the one thing that we should not do is we should not escalate this situation. By all means, we want to make sure to keep the temperature as low as possible. We do not want to increase the temperature and bring this thing to a boiling point. You see some discussions potentially being had between church members and protesters, very likely some arguments. One key thing to note here is that this is not the time to argue. The key point here being that if a group comes in and wants to agitate and wants to create issues, that's not the time to engage in an argument, because that is probably only going to get worse. So the main things we want to do here is keep that temperature low, de-escalate to the best of our ability, be calm, be polite, be respectful, even though it appears that they've come there to cause some issues. At the end of the day, everybody gets dignity and respect. So we want to treat these individuals with dignity and respect, try to keep that temperature low, and make sure law enforcement's on the way, because law enforcement's going to be able to deal with any law violations, the private property, trespassing, that kind of stuff is all going to be some tools that law enforcement's going to be able to employ, and they're going to be able to help deal with this situation better than the church safety or security team on their own. The big thing is getting more resources on the way, keeping that temperature low until they get there. And then when we get into some of those lessons learned, I already hit on one. It appears there's some arguments taking place. We want to just avoid those as much as we can. And reason being is this could absolutely get much worse. Like I said earlier, I'm not aware of any injuries or use of force, but use of force is one of those things that comes to people's mind very quickly when something like this happens. Could we have used force? If that happened at our church or XYZ church, wherever it is, the question gets asked a lot is, could the individuals on that safety or security team use force? I'm not going to get into that with a yes or no answer, but what I would say is that if force was used, it would obviously have to be legally justifiable, and you cannot help get it to that point. if you're seen as helping get it to that point, that is typically an issue legally. And that's where I want to pull in a incident from 2023 in Mississippi. I'm going to go ahead and roll the news clip now.
Thanks so much for joining us. I'm Carrie Lickett-Brown.
And I'm Michael Clark. George Ryan Walters will go to prison after pleading guilty to second-degree murder this morning. Now, District Attorney Chris Hennis says the 44-year-old Laurel man will serve 10 years of that sentence day for day in the custody of the Mississippi Department of Corrections. The other 10 years will be served on probation. In April of 2023, Walters shot James Corey Donald after an altercation at the Rock Pentecostal Church, where Walters was a member of the church security team. Walters was originally charged with second-degree murder, but the charge was upgraded to first-degree murder and aggravated assault throughout the process. Walters' sentence length is the result of accepting a guilty plea to a lesser second-degree murder charge.
The victim's daughter, Taylor Dearman, shared an impact statement with WDAM, which was also read in court today. It reads in partial quotes, quote, "I will never be able to quite understand how you, a reserve sheriff's deputy, someone who people are supposed to trust to keep them safe, could viciously take my daddy's life like you did. There isn't a day that goes by that I'm not reminded of your heinous actions that for so long caused me to harbor so much hatred and anger in my heart towards you. I know that if my daddy were standing here before you today, he would forgive you too. He would look you in your eyes and say his infamous saying, and I quote, 'I love you and Jesus loves you too,' end quote."
Walters will have to pay court costs, including a $1,000 fine to Jones County and $2,500 to the Crime Victims Compensation Fund.
So that news clip from WDAM 7 in 2023 tells us about an individual that was on his church's security team in Mississippi. That individual, from what we know from other sources, was responding to a potentially suspicious person that was creating a disturbance. So long story short, it sounds like he engages with that individual. They end up outside. One of the articles that I read states that he removed him from the building. They end up outside. It turns physical, and then he ends up deciding that he needs to defend himself and shoots and kills the individual. He ends up getting charged and convicted of murder, and that's where I want to draw the parallels here. Is what we saw in Minnesota was absolutely tense. I am sure that the members of the church felt disrespected. I'm sure that they were upset. And that is where it can become very dangerous to get your emotions involved, to get your ego involved, and to turn into this battle of who's right and who's wrong. Because that's where we can see, like the 2023 incident, same deal there. I don't have all the details. I don't have all the perspectives, but it does sound like something that could have been avoided. And it does sound like something that could very, very easily have happened in Minnesota. If somebody would have engaged in the argument, helped bring the temperature up, and got into this battle of egos and perspectives and opinions, the temperature could absolutely have kept rising and rising until it gets to the point where somebody uses force on somebody else. And as a church safety or security team member, one of the worst case scenarios, probably the worst case scenario aside from an active killer event, would be where a situation escalates and then force is used and it's found to be not justifiable. That is absolutely one of the worst case scenarios, something that we would never advocate for here and that we want to avoid at all costs for obvious reasons. And so to draw some parallels between those two incidents, we want to make sure that we avoid what happened in 2023 in Mississippi, where the church security or safety team member ends up shooting and killing this individual and now is spending some time in prison for his actions. And so if we can avoid that at all costs, we absolutely want to. So that brings us back to get law enforcement on the way and de-escalate. There's a lot of other little ones that can absolutely be brought out, Monday morning quarterbacked, but another big key theme here is situational awareness. I know situational awareness is something it's a pillar, it's a foundational concept, it's something that as a church safety or security team member that needs to be in place at all times. But that's something to think about with this incident in Minnesota. If you see something like this developing in your church, there may be some steps you can take. If you start seeing a couple individuals coming in with signs, I don't know if they arrived all in one group all at once, But if you start seeing this thing unfolding, maybe there's a situation where doors can be closed, the church service can be shut down for the day. And I know that's very debatable on should a church shut down or not, but just throwing some other options out there. Is it possible that we could close it down for the day? We could secure the facility. We could let law enforcement come and defuse the whole thing and at least hopefully keep some of the protesters outside, by shutting down the service and that sort of thing. That could be a different scenario. But the key theme here is we're going to want to not engage with them as much as possible, be respectful, be calm, be collected, and be intentional and methodical about what we're doing. The worst possible thing we can do in a situation like this is let our emotions and our ego get involved and drive the situation towards something that nobody wants the result to be. So those are some key takeaways. If you have any other thoughts, please drop them in the comments below. I would love to hear from you. Like I said, this is a very recent event. It's going to be something that's going to be on a lot of people's minds throughout the week, especially church and safety and security teams as they approach the next weekend. And there's some thoughts on what if this were to come to our church. So would love to hear some thoughts in the comments section. Thank you very much for watching this video, and we will see you on the next one. Thank you for joining us on this episode of Prepared to Prevail. Please visit preparedtoprevail.com for more resources and educational materials.